In some ways, this year is more challenging than last, given our expectations for a return to normal. Last year, we were all in this together. We were going to make the best of it. So many of us are disappointed, although I am truly appreciative that I'm not giving my Yom Kippur sermon to a bunch of cardboard cutouts, and so grateful to see so many of you who are here in person. Most of my Yom Kippur sermons have been about overcoming adversity, finding hope in difficult times, whether after 9/11, the Tree of Life shootings, or other very personal challenges or tragedies. This year for millions all over the world is no different. Sometimes when we are suffering, we feel as if we have been singled out. We wonder why God has picked on us. But my life as a rabbi has taught me that if that's what we think, then we are mistaken. We are never alone in our suffering. Scratch the surface of any family, any social gathering, any congregation, and you will find loss and pain. We may not always be privy to the pain, but it's there just the same. If we had the power to peek inside the heart of any human being, we would uncover there a silent anguish. But we'd also critically see a wellspring of resilience, that even after loss comes hope and comfort. With that in mind, there are two final scenes in the last episode of Shtisel, the Israeli series about Haredi life, that felt especially moving for me this year. In the first, Shulam, the father, returns to his house, discovers that his son and his brother are packing up their belongings, about to leave, and he begs them to just stay and drink one more glass of soda with them. And when they do, he tells them about a beautiful sentence he once read in one of Isaac Batsheva Singer's books, which goes something like this: "The dead do not go anywhere. They're all in here." Every human being is a cemetery, a real cemetery in which all of our loved ones lie. Everyone is here. And as Shulam basically shares this wisdom, their dining table starts to become populated with some of the characters that we've gotten to know who have passed away. People are passing food and talking and smiling. It's a stunning cinematic moment, one that we could only dream of, that we could have one more meal, one more time where we treasure a moment with the people we loved. This quintessential movie Yisker image corresponds with themes that we've seen throughout the series of dealing with loss, helping us to internalize that we never actually lose anyone, that they are always here with us, an integral part of who we are and have become. And then we're all witness to the final scene in which the happy, tearful, and excited family members are seen around Ruchami's hospital bed, who has struggled at risk to her own life to have a baby. Ruchami is happily hugging her little daughter, and in a haunting way looks directly at us, the viewers. Here in the final scenes, we have death and life alongside each other and within us. These two scenes reminded me of an incredible documentary called The Long Way Home, about the Jews in the DP camps after the war. One of the most chilling scenes in this movie was footage from the very first Yizkor after liberation. You look at the faces of the people in this room and you know that they are saying Kaddish, some of them, for every family member they ever knew. At the same time, it was reported that the largest percentage population growth in the world after World War II was in these DP camps. There were stories about a woman with one white blouse, and she would wear that blouse for her wedding and wash it as best she could and give it to the next woman, and so on. And there wasn't just a boom in weddings, but also in people having babies. These inspiring stories of wondrous resilience are about the human spirit there in the worst devastation to humanity. Psychologists define resilience as a process of adapting well in the face of adversity and trauma. It's not just about survival, it's about growth. It's about turning the current emergency into an emergence of something greater within ourselves. Resilience is the process of creating meaning out of life's contradictions of darkness and light. It builds on the strengths of relationship and community. Do any people carry the seeds of rebirth within them more than the Jewish people? When we think about it, Jewish history and Judaism are all about resilience on a national scale. If you look back at Jewish history, every period of struggle was followed by a flowering of creative energy and new beginnings. The destruction of the Second Temple was followed by the flourishing of the rabbinic Judaism we still practice today. The expulsion of the Jews from Spain led to the dissemination of Kabbalah, including the Lecha Dodi we sing on Friday evening. Even the greatest tragedy of all, the Shoah, was answered not by despair, but by the rebirth of the new state of Israel and by a renaissance of Jewish culture and community here in the diaspora. But what about resilience on a personal level? So many people have asked me, Rabbi, what uplifted your spirits this year? Where did you find the seeds of hope and renewal in the midst of so much illness and sadness? What lifted my spirits was every bar and bat mitzvah that we celebrated, some of which were exclusively on Zoom, some of which were in person with 15 people in masks in our sanctuary. Watching these young people who did not get the bar or bat mitzvah they prepared or dreamed about, with all of their family and friends gathering close to celebrate, who took this disappointment on their shoulders at 13 years old to lead us in what came to be, for me, perhaps the most spiritual and uplifting moments of the year. Each of them rose to the occasion to overcome whatever disappointment they had, giving us hope. We also witnessed resilience in so many who lost loved ones and couldn't have a traditional Shiva, but for whom a virtual minyan and community helped them in dealing with their grief. And I have never worked with more couples to plan weddings, including all those that had to reschedule and reframe the vision of their simcha, and found great joy in the midst of challenges, including our own son and daughter-in-law. There are so many other stories that parallel these, where creative energy, even modern miracles, are motivated out of personal and historical stories of tragedy. The Pfizer vaccine has a remarkable backstory of resilience. Dr. Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer, who shepherded the vaccine's development, is one of those stories. Borla, the son of Sephardic Holocaust survivors from Thessaloniki, Greece, tells of how his father and his uncle witnessed their entire family's deportation from the ghetto to Auschwitz. His mother, Sarah, the daughter of a prosperous family in the silk trade, was taken as a young teenager by her older sister who had converted to marry a Christian government officer. Sarah lived in hiding, was betrayed by a neighbor. She was transferred to a prison where a bribe from her brother-in-law to the head of the Nazis saved her life, just as Sarah was lined up on the wall, ready before a firing squad. Borla relates that his parents not only survived, they told him their story. The most important thing for me was that my parents spoke to me about it, but they never spoke to me about revenge. They never told us that we should hate those that did that to us. The way that their stories were always ending was a celebration of life. We were almost dead and we're alive. Life is wonderful. Of that bustling community, few survived the Nazi occupation. In a city of 50,000, only 2,000 survived. You do the math, Borla relates. That's 96% extermination. Personal story of tragedy, inspiring a life's mission, from 96% extermination to Pfizer's 96% success story. This past winter, my brother Scott and I spent hours each day walking in some of the most beautiful forest preserves in Lee County, Florida, protected from the sun by the shade and the shadows of magnificent oak and pine trees. I'm sure all of you at one point or another read The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein, the child who is nourished by this tree and sits in its shade. It's a beautiful idea, the shade of a tree. In our tradition, we read, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, and that makes that shadow seem so terrible and frightening. But at the same time, the psalmist talks about B'tseil Shaddai Yit Lonan, that God casts a protective shadow over all of God's creation. It occurred to me that if we live a certain way, then even our death provides a shade that is nourishing to those who come after. Even in the darkest, most difficult, most perilous, most despairing circumstances, there is light, there is possibility, and there is hope. I've seen this again and again as a rabbi at a funeral. Someone devastated by the death of a loved one will remember something they taught them, something they said, something they did, and it's as if you have turned on a light inside and you realize that the legacy of the shadow has created day. To this day, almost 17 years later, our family still feels the protective and nourishing shadow of our mother. She was someone who showed us the power of faith and resilience in the face of suffering and of death. And in her final hospitalization, she dictated to a friend a story called the Red Wagon, in which she reflected on dreaming of her brother, Uncle Jerry's wagon that she played with as a child. She put, she said, all of her tzoros, her troubles, into it, but feared that she would be unable to pull the wagon after she did so because of its weight and age. So she decided to add into the wagon the balance of all the wonderful things that happened to her in life. Her husband and children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and friends and organizations and everyone whose life she realized meant so much to her. Mom found that when she loaded the wagon, it was indeed easy to pull, as was her burden to bear. The wonderful life she lived in balance far outweighed the difficulties. When someone we love has died, there is no replacing that person. Their death leaves an emptiness, which even with wonderful memories and keepsakes will never be filled. Whatever you do, you'll go through life with a piece of you missing. No matter how full, how crowded your life may go on to become, there will always be that new and different space. But what I realized in the years after my mother's passing is that the person who has survived bereavement has learned that losing part of him or herself is an inevitable part of life. That person has become a more complete person than he or she could have been before. The fact is, there is no such thing as a life that isn't missing a piece. Can't be a full life without disappointment, pain, and loss. The following poem only enhanced my growing faith in the power of God's healing, no matter what life throws at us. It's entitled, God's Boxes. I have in my hand 2 boxes which God gave me to hold. He said, put all your sorrows in the black box and all your joys in the gold. I heeded his words, and in the 2 boxes, both my joys and sorrows I stored. But though the gold became heavier every day, the black was as light as before. With curiosity, I opened the black. I wanted to find out why, and I saw in the base of the box a hole, which my sorrows had fallen out by. I showed the hole to God and mused, I wonder where my sorrows could be. God smiled a gentle smile and said, my child, they're all here with me. I asked God why he gave me the boxes, why the gold and the black with the hole. My child, the gold is for you to count your blessings. The black is for you to let go. My friends, keeping with the theme that our president said last night, I may know at least one story about most of you who are joining for services here today, both here and virtually. It also occurs to me that I may know too much. I don't mean you'll have to hire a mafia hitman to get rid of me. When I say that I may know too much, I mean that it is and has been a sacred burden to know so many stories. I suppose that's why I identify with the character of the stage manager in Thornton Wilder's Our Town. I've realized over the decades that maybe it's the rabbi's job to simply be present for all the great passages of life. I'm supposed to remember what most folks don't have the time to think about every day and night. I feel that way when I look out on Shabbat or holidays and can still see, envision those who were so much a part of our congregational life. I can see where they sat each Shabbat and Yom Tov. Maybe that's why the Jews have designed this rabbi job, to see that at least one of us gets to the births and deaths and marriages and somehow tries to remember them, integrate them all, and then try to make some sense out of all of the life stuff. Our Yizkor service in a few moments has just a few prayers and then moments of silence to think about and to feel our losses. And like that Steen season in Shtisel with which I began, I ask you to consider for a moment, who would you like to have seated next to you? If you could choose anyone who has passed, bring them back right now, who would it be? And for a moment, imagine, what would they look like? What age would they be? Older, younger? Would they be wearing any favorite jewelry, accessories? Do you remember their scent, favorite perfume or cologne? Can you sense their presence. Know, with whomever you invite, that they are so glad to be with you in presence, to sit next to you today as you sit quietly, remembering and experience this moment. Some of us today recall parents who gave us life, who cared for us, nurtured us, taught us to take our first steps on our own. Some of us remember a husband, wife, or partner, friend, or lover with whom we shared so much of our lives, our failures and achievements, joys and sorrows, intimate secrets. Some of us recall brothers and sisters who matured together with us, sometimes competing and sometimes encouraging us on, bound to us by a lifelong relationship. Many of us recall relatives who knew us and beloved friends who walked beside us in life, guiding us, listening to us, supporting us. Our lives are shaped by those who were alongside us as we walked on our path. Take a few precious moments to visit with those you have loved and you've invited to sit next to you during this Yiskor service, a profound time of remembering. May memories of love inspire us to love. May painful memories impel us to mitigate the pain others experience. And with resilience, may we be granted the strength to affirm life's meaning even in the face of loss. May God continue to comfort all of us who mourn, and may their memories bring us healing and peace. And we say, Amen. We will continue now with the Yiskor service. Can be found on page 290. We will be opening up our ark and taking out our Holocaust Sefer Torah.